Today's episode is brought to you by Patreon. If you're interested in supporting the show, go to patreon.com/JoshuaVelas and become a $2 backer today and get early access to the new episodes. I'll be leaving a link in the description down below, but for now, on to today's episode. You're listening to the Augmented Experience podcast. I'm your host, as usual, Joshua Velas. I'm a student, musician, and a gamer at heart. Join me as I sit down every week to talk about all the latest news in the technology, business, and video game world. I hope you guys enjoy. All right, everybody, welcome back to the show. My name is Joshua Velas. I am your host, as usual, and obviously, welcome back to the show. Today's episode 92 of the show, and, well, I'm going to do a little bit of house cleaning first because, well, we kind of have to because, we kind of were gone for a week. So if you guys were following me on my Instagrams and social medias in general, I posted that I was not able to do the show last week. And reasoning behind that is I'm dealing with a lot of, say, personal things going on with the school in regards to my job. Spoiler, I can't work. That, obviously in relation to the whole situation going on with the world right now. Long story short, can't take their chances with me. I went home. Where I live is kind of a hot spot for that stuff. So they don't want to take their chances, and, it's perfectly fine. So I've been having to deal with all that stuff, and since I wasn't expecting to not go back, I have to go get my rig, and so that's why I didn't have my editing rig last week, and, because there was stuff going on in town, I wasn't able to go somewhere to go edit, and so I was like, you know what, let's take a break. I've kind of earned a break, 91 episodes straight, but we're back. And a lot of stuff has changed in the past few days, or really in the last week, that a lot of news came out. I've been paying attention to a lot of the stuff going on in tech world. Obviously, stuff related to, the situation going around the world and stuff like that. And I think with me, it's kind of interesting seeing everything because the main big news is obviously today's episode. But again, I thank all my Patreon backers for supporting my show. It really means a lot to me that you guys continue to support me. Obviously to all of you that kept listening and kept, tuning into all the other episodes I have, because, we have a 91 episode catalog, which, pretty big catalog, and a lot of great stuff in there. So obviously we're back. I'm also using new equipment this time around. So I actually upgraded from my Zoom H4 that I normally use to record the show. And I actually upgraded to a Zoom H6, which, if you guys don't know, the Zoom H4 Pro is a really, really great handy recorder. And I ended up selling it to my church. They needed it because, they need tools to live stream and record the services and everything to provide to the congregation during this time that we currently live in. And so I was like, you know what? I'll sell you guys it. I have it. And then I just decided to upgrade to the H6 because I've been wanting this bad boy for a long time. And, well, you guys will be able to enjoy it. And this was a very handy tool that helped me throughout many different ventures. But aside from that, today's episode 92, we're going to be talking about the Xbox Series 1, or really Xbox Series X, which, yeah, Xbox Series X and the PS5. So what actually changed from the last time? And spoiler warning, if you've been keeping up with me or if you've been keeping up with what's going on Twitter and everything and the conversation in Reddit and Twitter threads, yeah, a good amount has changed. And I'd say for good or worse, but there's definitely a lot of good here. Microsoft is the one that definitely has me the most, I'd say, feeling like, okay, they know what they're doing. They feel confident. While Sony this time around seems to not be so confident. They seem to be more, how would you say, worried. They seem to be more unprepared for this one. They seem more caught off guard. But let me explain why I have that mindset and, even break down what we got. So, in the past week, Microsoft did an event where they invited Digital Foundry and Austin Evans to literally break down the Xbox Series X. They had it in hand. They broke it down piece by piece. They showed off everything inside of it, where everything goes. And they also got to test out games running on the console. And this is huge for many different reasons. And I know I'm kind of late to the party, but I have a very interesting mindset regarding this, because in regards to what Digital Foundry showed, yes, the next Xbox looks incredible in terms of performance and what they're offering. The fact that the Coalition, which if you guys don't know who they are, the Coalition are the creators of Gears of War. They are the studio responsible for creating Gears of War 5, Gears of War 4, etc., all the Gears of War. And they actually got Gears of War 5 running on the Xbox Series X in about 2 weeks, running at native 4K 60, no issues. And it looks amazing. And they also, in terms of the team at Mojang, they also got one developer, got 4 weeks, and he was able to get a test demo of ray tracing Minecraft working on the Xbox Series X, and it works flawlessly. Granted, yes, when you watch it in a video, it does look a little bit glitchy, but it actually doesn't look so bad based on what people are saying in person, that it's actually not so bad in person. In person they said it's not so bad, but we have to see. Obviously, it makes sense because it was one developer 4 weeks to himself. So I wouldn't be surprised. But the fact that they got it running is very incredible. And they also talked about a lot of the specs in the next Xbox, which a lot of people were thinking, okay, what is Microsoft going to cram inside this thing? This thing is going to be a juggernaut in terms of power, because we know we're running Zen 2 architecture. We know we're running RDNA 2 for the graphics cards. We know we're running SSDs. We know we're running all these great things inside of it. So they actually did show off the specs. So these are the specs for the next Xbox. We're running an 8-core 16-thread CPU that clocks at 3.8 if you're just running all the cores by themselves, so 3.8 gigahertz. And it runs at 3.6 gigahertz with SMT enabled. Obviously, this is a custom Zen 2 architecture chip. In terms of the GPU, we have 52 CUs, all clocked at 1.825 gigahertz, or 1,825 megahertz. That's an RDNA 2 GPU, and obviously, when you add all that up, it adds up to 12 teraflops of performance. So Microsoft did it really well. Obviously, 7 nanometer process, because it's running off Zen 2 architecture, so makes sense. The memory, we're running with 16 gigabytes of GDDR6 with 3200B bus. Granted, even though it is running 16 gigabytes of RAM, each of the RAMs I'd say the RAM is delegated into different categories. So you have 10 gigabytes of RAM are dedicated just for games. 3.5 are dedicated for, I forgot what they said, that it was something very specific. And then the remaining 2.5 gigahertz are dedicated for running the OS and etc. And so this is very nice. Obviously 10 gigabytes for games, that's perfectly adequate. That's actually really good. In terms of the memory bandwidth, it runs at 10 gigabytes at, I think it says 560 gigabytes per second. And then, 6 gigabytes runs at the 336 gigabytes per second. Obviously, this is the bandwidth for the actual RAM. So, the 10 gigabytes for gaming is obviously running at a much higher clock. And then, the rest 6 is actually not so bad. We're running with a 1 terabyte custom NVMe SSD, which they actually said the IO throughput. It's going to be able to run 2.4 gigabytes raw and then 4.8 gigabytes per second compressed with custom hardware, decompression block, etc., etc. And one thing some people were interested about when they saw the leak for the Xbox Series X, when they saw the little slot in the back, people were like, okay, what the heck is that little slot for? And we actually found out it's actually going to be for custom expansion cards. So Microsoft, what they said when they were talking about the Series X with Digital Foundry and Austin Evans, was that in order to make the games or make the experience very consistent, they wanted to make sure that you can't just slap in any other SSD because it's all custom, because Microsoft making sure that it's all custom so everything works the way it's supposed to. What they did was they made custom expansion cards that are basically just the internal SSD, just basically external. You can just take it with you. And I think that's actually pretty cool. I think with the expansion cards, that's actually a pretty cool idea. Now, granted, they will be available at launch, but I will say this: these things are going to be expensive. We know they're not going to be cheap. So have your wallets ready for that, guys. Obviously, in terms of external storage, you're going to be able to use USB 3.2 external hard drive support. The optical drive, it is keeping it, so it's going to be a 4K Ultra HD Blu-ray drive. Awesome. And the performance target for this one is 4K at 60 frames per second, up to 120 frames per second. And based on a lot of the test demos that Microsoft showed off, in this event, or I'd say really the showcase to Digital Foundry and Austin Evans, they're showing very, very great promise in terms of living up to the power. Because granted, I've even said this, when I looked at the clock speed of the GPU, it actually reminded me of a 2080 Ti, because I know a good amount of the 20 Ti's run at 1825 megahertz. And the fact that it's able to be consistent at that clock speed is very, very impressive. And I'm excited to see, more games. I'm excited to see if they actually show Halo running on this bad boy, which obviously, as you guys know, Halo Infinite is the launch title for the Xbox Series X. And, granted, based on the little details that we've actually seen about it, everyone's pretty excited. Now, granted, we do want to see more about it because it's Halo. And Microsoft did all this. And I want to start with Microsoft a little bit rather than just go straight into Sony. Microsoft caught everyone off guard with this. This was not typical Microsoft. This was not typical, not your everyday routine. Like, this was something weird. This was out of the blue. Nobody was expecting for Microsoft to have this much confidence to basically say, hey, here's the next console in its entirety, and we'll let people break it down and take it apart so you guys can see what's on the inside and how this thing actually functions. Microsoft basically put the ball in Sony's court at that point, because they're showing an unprecedented amount of confidence going into this generation, especially coming after the heels of the last gen, which if you guys know, is the Xbox One and the PS4, which, we'll be honest, the PS4 definitely outsold the Xbox One by a county mile, and it's not even a joke. It wasn't even a competition. And now, granted, that does not mean that Microsoft was not able to make better hardware. Because obviously, if we're comparing the Xbox One X to the PS4 Pro, the Xbox One X curve stomps the PS4 Pro by a lot. And I know some people were trying to start a beef on Twitter saying, hey, Microsoft focused so much on frame rate and on resolution, and Sony just got this good frame rate. I'm like, yes, of course. A game that's running at 4K 30 natively, no issues, that looks gorgeous, great. And then Sony is running a game at below, I think it was 1800p, and I don't even know what it wasn't even like 10. It was some weird resolution, and they couldn't even get it at 60. And some people were like, oh, the PS4 Pro is better than the Xbox One X. I'm like, well, duh, it's running at a lower resolution. What do you expect? You can't compare two different resolutions and say, oh, this one performs, well, duh, of course it's going to perform better. That's, you get what I mean? That's logic. And I'll be honest, a lot of Sony fanboys got mad when they saw the Xbox Series X and in actual trying, actually Digital Foundry breaking it down. And a lot of people ripped into Sony because they're like, okay, Microsoft has all this confidence. They showed off the console. Not only did they show the console off at the Game Awards, they showed what it looks like. They showed what game's going to launch with it. Now they actually show a complete breakdown, and they're like, hey, this is what we've been working on the past 4 years. What do you guys think? And I think Microsoft made a smart call on this one. I think that they knew that they had to do something different. They knew that they had to go out of their comfort zone if they want to make a splash this generation, because yes, they're definitely recovering after the last gen, because they got their asses handed to them pretty handily. We're not going to stand here and pretend like Microsoft had a chance last gen. No, they messed up out of the gate and they couldn't recover. Now, granted, with Phil Spencer running the ship now, definitely I see a much better future. Microsoft has definitely been pushing for a lot more healthier things like crossplay, backwards compatibility, obviously the relationship that they have with Nintendo right now, and the fact that they were able to get Sony out of their stubborn place and get crossplay enabled. Like, Microsoft has definitely been pushing a lot of healthy things for the industry. Obviously, xCloud, they're pushing that more now, and they're actually making good progress on it. A lot of their games were actually really good. Like, Ori did really well based on what I've seen about it. Gears of War 5 did pretty well, obviously. Forza's always good. It's Forza. Halo has people really excited right now. The fact that they brought, Microsoft got the Master Chief Collection on PC, which is the first time Halo's been on PC since the original Halo. So Microsoft, and then obviously with the Xbox One X, the fact that they were to have the most powerful console on the market and take advantage of that power, and they did something really incredible. And I know that they're working hard to go back into the good graces of the consumer right now, because they know that they were behind, and they made a lot of smart decisions. Granted, they're still not perfect. They're going to make dumb calls, and I've said that multiple times. They're going to make dumb calls. But the decisions that they made so far are definitely helping them and putting them in a great position to launch the next generation. The one thing they obviously didn't tell was the price, which I think in due time we will find out. And depending on what they do, Sony could be in some trouble. But on to Sony, because this is where I wouldn't say I'm going to go on a rant, but I'd say I'm a little bit interested on why Sony did what they did. And granted, I will be very transparent and upfront about this. I saw the event live, and I understand that this was a CDC event. This was meant for stockholders and, obviously the developers. This is not meant for us, the consumers and everything. But the fact that it came the day after the big Xbox reveal, it was not a good idea to do that. And let me explain why. So, going over the PlayStation event, obviously the president of PlayStation came out. He talked about, what they're working on, the road to the PS5, and he primarily focused on the SSD and audio. And granted, yes, they also did reveal the specs, but the specs aren't very impressive, and this is very concerning for a reason. So, we'll talk about the specs, and then we'll go into why this event was really weird and why a lot of people were calling this a snooze fest and stuff like that. Starting with the actual processor, we're looking at a same thing. It's a Zen 2 architecture, obviously 8 core 16 threads. It's going to be clocked at max 3.5 gigahertz, but it's a variable frequency, because Sony was making that very clear that they're more prioritizing on variable frequencies rather than consistent big numbers. In terms of the GPU, it's 32 CUs at 2.23 gigahertz, so 2,230 megahertz. But it's also variable, so it caps at that 2.23 gigahertz, but you might not always hit it. So that adds up to 10.28 teraflops, which, not so good compared to the Xbox, because what we've seen. Obviously, the same way, we're looking at 16 gigabytes of GDDR6 RAM at a 256-bit, so not as actually highly clocked as the Xbox, and obviously its memory bandwidth is 448 gigabytes per second. They have a custom SSD inside. It's only 825 gigabytes though, so that means it's not 1 terabyte and then take off a little portion for the OS and stuff. No, this is 825, and then you have to take off the everything. But it's obviously a very fast SSD based on what we saw. They said the IO throughput is 5.5 gigabytes per second raw, and then obviously the typical 8 to 9 gigabytes per second compressed. And that's why they focused so much on the SSD, was because they wanted to show hey, this is a pretty crazy SSD they put inside of it. Now, granted, one thing I will say I like, though, what Sony's doing is that they acknowledge that making it proprietary is going to be pretty hard. It's going to make things expensive. But so they decided that with the PS5, you're going to be able to install your own M.2 SSD. Now, granted, they've said it very clearly that it will only be very specific M.2s. So you have to wait and see what they actually say they're compatible with, and, go from there. But I'm saying this right now, it's not going to be cheap M.2s. They're not going to be like Crucial P1s. It's probably going to be like Samsung 970 Evo Pluses and, Aurorus, the big PCI 4 cards, and et cetera, et cetera. In terms of external storage, they're supporting USB H, basically HDD support. So not the same as Microsoft's, where it's USB 3.2. So keep that in mind. And obviously they added the 4K UHD Blu-ray player, which made sense. Sony makes 4K Blu-ray players. Their console couldn't even get a 4K Blu-ray player. Yeah, it's weird to say that, but here's where we're at. And if we're comparing console to console, Ben Sony even said this himself, and I laughed my butt off when I heard them say this. You cannot compare our parts to computer parts. You can't, because they're custom. And I'm like, yes and no. Yes, you can compare them to computer parts because it's based off an architecture that's inside of actual computers. So yes, you can compare them. But I understand that, yes, they're also custom. They're also specially, designed for specific tasks inside of the console, et cetera, et cetera. But still, yes, I think that was a bad idea. And the fact that I heard that they said that you shouldn't compare our consoles to PCs made things, it basically gave away to me that they are not going to be able to, they know they cannot compete with the Xbox. They know that they cannot realistically compete with the power of the next Xbox. Now, granted, I think this might help the PS5 because if they know they can't compete, they might try to lower the price. Unless if they go crazy and make it actually more, which that's why I think Microsoft is holding off on showing the price, because they're probably waiting to see if Sony will show theirs first, which I wouldn't be surprised, because I've got on record multiple times saying that I would not be surprised if Microsoft sells the Xbox Series X at a loss and sells it like at 500 or something. If they sell out of that, I think they have a winner because of all the power. Like, that's basically a high-end PC for $500. Now, granted, yes, that you have to include Xbox Live and everything, et cetera, but that's a whole different topic. In terms of spec-wise, though, the only area that the PS5 beats the Xbox Series X is the SSD, for sure. In terms of read and write speeds and everything, it definitely has a beat. Now, granted, in terms of storage size, I'm more worried the fact that its base is 825, so that means that it actually is going to be even lower than that. So I don't think that was a bright idea on Sony's part to do that. I think they should have just made it to 1 terabyte. But I like that Sony definitely, and Microsoft too. Like, Sony, what they did with theirs is they actually compared it to the PS4, and they're like, yeah, this thing is so much more powerful than the PS4. It's not even funny, which they have a point. It actually is. Yeah, it's way, way, way above the power of the PS4. And it makes sense because these are actual desktop CPUs that are, and also really good desktop CPUs to be mindful of. They also have a lot of GPU power. They also spent a lot of time talking about audio, which I think was really dumb. I don't think really anybody cares about audio in their consoles. Like, guys, you're plugging in your headphones into your controller. Unless your controller has a hi-fi deck, I don't think you should really care so much, But that's a whole different other side topic, Like, that's not even relevant to the top. Well, I wouldn't say it's not relevant, but I'd say it's not the main priority, But aside from that, everybody, when they saw this event, they were not happy. A lot of people were like, look, Sony, this was a bad idea. They should have not done this. They should have not done the CDC event right after the Xbox. This was a terrible idea. You left a bad stigma on the consumers, and it made them look like they don't know what they're doing. And that's how a lot of people view Sony right now, is that they don't know what they're doing. And Microsoft is just coming out here looking like the big Chad. He's like, I know what I'm doing. I'm well equipped to take on the market, and I know I'm more powerful than the PS4, or really the PS5. And it's very interesting, that granted, yes, we have not seen the PS5 at all. We have not seen this thing actually run. Sony did not actually want to show this thing running, which I think that was a really bad idea to not show it running. I think they should have. I think that would have gave people a little bit more hope and more confidence to see how it does. Or heck, even do what they did with Digital Foundry. But granted, I know Sony's not going to do that because it's Sony. But aside from that, I think this was a really bad idea in terms of Sony's part. I think that what they did was not the brightest of ideas to do a CDC event. I do not think that this was very wise, because you get what I mean? It left a bad taste in the consumer's mouth and made them feel like, look, Sony, you're just wasting our time. This just feels like a snooze fest. We want to see the console. We want to see games running. Because that's the one thing that Sony hasn't done, is they just gave us a name. Show us a picture of the damn thing. What does this thing look like? Like, can you show us something running on it? Like, please? Like, You get what I mean? I think they're scared to show it. And I know that Microsoft, they don't care. Microsoft is in a position, and this isn't even me being a Microsoft shill or anything. This is being objective and being honest with y'all. Microsoft is showing how confident they are. They're showing like, look, this is what we have to offer. What we have to offer is amazing. Check out what this thing can do. And they're showing you step by step how awesome this thing is and how cool it is. And Sony is just leaving us in the dark. And this is coming from somebody that grew up with Sony. Like, I grew up with a PS2. And then, I got my Wii, and then I got my DS, and then I got my 3DS, and then I got my Xbox 360. And, obviously then I have my Xbox One, my Xbox One S, my Nintendo Switch, You get what I'm saying? Like, we just keep going and going. And it just saddens me that Sony just seems like they don't know what they're doing, And I think that's scary a little bit because, when you don't seem to know what you're doing, that's what makes it really hard, is when you don't know what you're doing. And, it's mind-boggling because, like, I've said this. I knew the Series X was going to be much more powerful than the PS5. Granted, it is powerful by a good amount because, Microsoft is focused more on consistent cores, consistent clock, and Sony is more worried about variable, which both are good in their own right. I just prefer with more consistent, like, look, consistently run at this clock speed. Like, and we don't even know what the design of the PS4 is. So technically, if this thing is a tiny box, we're going to have a problem in terms of cooling it because, cooling it is not the easiest thing to do. It really isn't. But aside from that, overall, I think how I feel about it, I am much more excited for the next Xbox for sure. Microsoft has managed to get me hyped to the point that, look, when this thing goes on pre-order and I see a little bit more details, I'm definitely going to pre-order this thing day one. I'm going to pick up an Xbox Series X and do a review, play Halo, because it just looks so good based on what we're seeing on paper. And the fact that they actually showed it running is what makes it even better. It's the cherry on top, it's like it's doubting all my fears because there's nothing to doubt because I'm seeing everything in front of me work. Now, granted, yes, some people are saying, well, those are Xbox One games. Those aren't, new games, and et cetera, et cetera. And I'm like, well, yes. You also have to keep in mind, one thing that Microsoft is doing better than Sony is backwards compatibility. And this is one thing that even Sony, a lot of people are getting their grill about of this right now because the backwards compatibility on the PS4 is abysmal. The fact that they said that it's only going to support PS5 games, PS4, and PS4 Pro. There is no backwards compatibility for PS3, PS2, and PS1. I think that is a terrible idea from Sony's part. They need to learn that, look, this does not fly anymore in the market. People want backwards compatibility. And granted, they also have somebody working there that's basically like, look, you want to play PS3 games, you can go buy a PS3. There's like PS3 for a reason to play PS3 games. And in terms of I'd say in this case, with Microsoft, they're doing a lot of backwards compatibility. Microsoft has been improving backwards compatibility since obviously last generation. They've been getting a lot of games on it. They've been getting Game Pass. Game Pass is doing really well, etc., etc. And, they're doing really well for themselves. But aside from that, I am excited for the next consoles. I hope you are too, if you're a console gamer. If you're a PC gamer, well, I know you really don't. You honestly don't care. I know you don't. But I think it's a really interesting discussion, because this shows that Microsoft is well equipped to handle this generation. I can tell that they're equipped to deal with Sony, unless if things change and you got what I mean, like unless if something drastically changes. I think the guys at Microsoft, they got this in the bag. I think they do. I think that they're well equipped to deal with this. I think they're well equipped to, beat Sony this gen. And granted, I will say this, and I will say this very clearly. Just because they have a better console does not mean they'll have better games. Granted, Microsoft has been buying studios. We know Hellblade is coming. We know Halo is coming. We know there's another Forza and Gears or something. Like, they're cooking up something in there. And PlayStation, obviously, we know The Last of Us 2 is coming. We know that they're working on a new Spider-Man. We know they're working on a new God of War. We know that we have Godfall coming. We know we have, I don't know what else is coming, but we know there's new games coming. And we know that Sony, Horizon Zero Dawn 2, we know that's coming. So that's obviously going to be competing with Breath of the Wild 2. But aside from that, this is going to be a good year. I just hope that Sony remedies some of these concerns that a lot of people have, like remedies the whole SSD concerns that people have, like the size is too small, especially because it's only going to get smaller from there. Backwards compatibility is the main one, and the big thing for both is pricing. How much are these things going to cost? If Microsoft is crazy, $500, would you pick one up? Let me know down below. Well, I wouldn't say down below, but let me know. What do you guys think? Would you guys buy an Xbox Series X if it was $500, or a PS5 if it was $500? Or would that be too much? What do you guys think? Let me know what you guys think about everything that we've learned so far about these consoles, because obviously at this point we already know everything about the Xbox Series X. The PS5, we still don't know what it looks like. We still don't know everything about it. We still don't know the thermal solution, which is actually pretty concerning. We don't know how this thing's going to cool. But aside from that, thank you guys so much for coming back and listening to today's episode. It really means a lot to me that you guys keep coming back and listening. You guys are just awesome. Like, that's the easiest way I can describe it, is you guys are awesome. I am just grateful for this privilege you guys have given me. You guys have given me this amazing privilege to talk to you guys, to share with you guys about what's going on in the tech industry, video game industry, Business Insider, like stuff like that. And I've just had an amazing time doing this. Obviously, yes, we're close to the 100 episode special, which that one I'm really excited for, especially because it is something very relevant. And because the discussion really has changed on that, But I'm excited overall. I'm excited for these new consoles. I'm excited for the direction that console gaming is going in, because this definitely is a big jump for this generation of consoles from the last gen, that we're talking about major power improvements, and we're gonna see those gains, and the only winners are the consumers, because we're the ones winning. Now, granted, we're gonna see how much these things cost, but aside from that, I know in time we will. Well, in time we'll see what the PS5 looks like. Hopefully it's not ugly, because man, that would really suck if it's ugly. But aside from that, thank you guys so much for your time. I love you guys to death. Thank you guys for being patient with me and, letting me enjoy a week off. Continue to have me in your thoughts and prayers, with everything that's going on with me and the personal stuff with school and work. It is getting a bit stressful, but thank you guys for all the love and support. It really, really means a lot to me. And I hope you guys enjoy this episode. I'll see you guys next week. And I love you guys to death. Please be safe. Have a wonderful weekend. Please take care with this whole situation going on. Careful who you're interacting with in public. Be safe. Don't do anything dumb. Be smart with your interactions. Wash your hands, etc., etc. Do what you need to do. Take care of others. Be polite to others and respect other people's space. Be a good person, basically. But aside from that, I love you guys. You guys take care. Bye, guys. Hey there. Thank you for listening to today's episode. I really appreciate it. Thank you guys so much for taking time out of your day and listening to today's episode. If you're interested in supporting the show, whether it be financially, clicking the follow button, or just sharing the episode, it all works for me, guys. Thank you guys so much for your time, and I love you guys to death.